Welcome back. On behalf of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli is in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to attend the BRICS Leaders Summit on Sunday and Monday. Diplomats from 11 emerging nations, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have been busy drafting a statement condemning the economic uncertainty. Artificial intelligence and health will be on the agenda at the summit. Leaders of growing BRICS group of developing nations were set to gather in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday, calling for reform of traditional Western institutions while presenting the bloc as a defender of multilateralism in an increasingly fractured world. Brazilian President Lula da Silva noted that BRICS nations now represent over half the world's population and 40% of its economic output. Details in the following reports. Were set to gather in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday, calling for reform of traditional Western institutions while presenting the bloc as a defender of multilateralism in an increasingly fractured world. With forums such as the G7 and the G20 groups of major economies hamstringed by divisions and the disruptive America's First approach of U.S. President Donald Trump, expansion of the BRICS has opened a new space for diplomatic coordination. Brazilian President Lula da Silva noted that BRICS nations now represent over half the world's population and 40% of its economic output. The BRICS group gathered leaders from Brazil, Russia, India, and China at its first summit in 2009. The bloc later added South Africa and last year included Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates as full members. This is the first leaders summit to include Indonesia also. Chinese President Xi Jinping chose to send his prime minister in his place. Russian President Vladimir Putin is attending online due to an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court. Still, many heads of state will gather for discussions at Rio's Museum of Modern Art on Sunday and Monday, including Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and South African President Ramaphosa. Over 30 nations have expressed interest in participating in the BRICS, either as full members or partners. Minister of Foreign Immigration and Expatriates Affairs Badr Abdulati stressed the importance of enhancing cooperation with the European Union through a comprehensive approach that links migration and development and focuses on addressing in the root causes of illegal migration. This came during a phone call Foreign Minister Abdulati received from EU's Internal Affairs Commissioner Mangus Brunner. Abdulati said that migration represents a common challenge between Egypt and the EU, which draws the need for promoting coordination based on mutual interests with the aim of supporting stability and development efforts in the region. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister discussed the economic burdens that Egypt faces in light of its hosting of millions of foreigners, including refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers who receive basic services like Egyptian citizens. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met the country's president today ahead of his visit to Washington, with talks focusing on the Gaza war and efforts to expand ties with Arab states. Netanyahu is expected at the White House on Monday for talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. President Isaac Herzog said in a statement that the Prime Minister carries with him an important mission, advancing a deal to bring all hostages home. He added that it is a supreme moral duty and that the cost is not simple. Israeli delegation heads to Qatar for talks today on a possible Gaza hostage and a ceasefire deal, although Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said that changes requested by Hamas to the ceasefire proposal were unacceptable. Palestinian group Hamas said on Friday it had responded to a U.S.-backed Gaza ceasefire proposal in a positive spirit, a few days after U.S. President Donald Trump said Israel had urged to the necessary condition to finalize a 60-day truce. The changes that Hamas seeks to make to the Qatari proposal were conveyed to us late night and are not acceptable to Israel, Netanyahu's office said in a statement. Israeli airstrikes killed at least 38 Palestinians in Gaza, as Israel's military said it has struck over 100 targets in the impalted enclave in the past days. Hospital officials made the statement on Sunday. The fighting came as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was preparing to fly to Washington for talks at the White House aimed at pushing forward ceasefire efforts. Meanwhile, according to the director of Shifa Hospital that serves the area, 20 Palestinians were killed and 25 wounded after Israeli strikes hit two houses in Gaza City. Officials at the Nasser Hospital in nearby Khan Yunis said that in southern Gaza, 13 Palestinians were killed by strike in Mawasi, is an area on Gaza's Mediterranean where many displaced Palestinians live in tents. Gaza's health ministry said Israel's military assault on the enclave has killed over 57,000 Palestinians. It has also caused a hunger crisis, displaced Gaza's entire population internally, and promoted accusation of genocide and war crime. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem said today that his group would not surrender or lay down in its weapons in response to Israeli threats. Despite pressure on the Lebanese group to disarm, Qassem said in a televised speech to thousands of his supporters in the southern suburb of Beirut during the Shiite Muslim religious commemoration of Ashura that this threat will not make them accept surrender. Lebanese leaders who took office in the aftermath of a war between Israel and Hezbollah last year have repeatedly vowed a state monopoly on bearing arms while demanding Israeli comply with a November ceasefire that ended the fighting. Qassem, who is succeeding longtime leader Hassan Nasrallah after the Israeli killed him in September, said the group's fighter would not abandon their arms and asserted that Israel's aggression must first stop. His speech came as U.S. envoy Tom Barak was expected in Beirut on Monday. The Israeli military said it had intercepted a missile launched from Yemen towards Israel in the early hours of today, with sirens activated in several parts of the country. A spokesperson for Houthis said in a statement several hours later that the group had fired a ballistic missile at central Israel's Jaffa area, and Israel has threatened the Houthis, which is attacking Israel in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, with a naval and air blockade if attacks on Israeli bases. Since the start of Israel's war in Gaza in October 2023, the Houthis, who control most of Yemen, had been fighting at Israel and at shipping in the Red Sea. Israel said that most of the dozens of missiles and drones they have launched have been intercepted or fallen short. Egypt expressed its sincere condolences to U.S.'s government and people for the victim of the floods in Texas, which resulted in severe casualties and injuries. In a statement for the Foreign Ministry, Egypt emphasized its full solidarity with the U.S. in this critical time. Egypt offered its deep sympathies to the families of the victims, wishing a speedy recovery to the injured. Rescuers searched through the night early Sunday for 27 girls missing from a riverside summer camp in Texas after torrential rains caused devastating floods that killed at least 50 people in the U.S. state. Multiple flash floods warning remained in place across central Texas after water surged through communities, with the Guadalupe rivers rising by 26 feet in just 45 minutes. Russian Defense Ministry said that its military forces have gained control of Sobolovivka in Ukraine's Kharkiv region and Dnipro in Donetsk region. Separately, Russian force hit a Ukrainian airbase, production of components for long-range drones, and ammunition warehouse. In another development, Russia's anti-aircraft system downed 120 Ukrainian drones overnight, mostly in regions bordering Ukraine. No damage was reported. The Defense Ministry said that the drones that were intercepted overnight included 30 over the western Bryansk region, 20 in the Kursk region, and 17 in Belgorod, of which share a border with Ukraine. Another 18 drones were downed over the Oriol region, which borders Kursk and has been hit by previous Ukrainian drones attack targeting oil facilities. Moving to the business, Minister of Finance Ahmed Kojak said today that he is looking forward to a large role by the BRICS in finding innovative solutions for the global debt crisis. The minister made this remark as he participated in a meeting of the BRICS finance ministers and central bank governors, saying that the bloc could contribute to pushing forward internal development efforts for a more balanced economic system. Kojak pointed out to the bloc's effect role in partnership with other parties to enhance debt swap initiative and limit the impact of global shocks, taking into account the emerging markets which were largely influenced by an increase in the customs tariffs. Egypt's stock market closed higher today, aimed at purchases by global and local investors and cooperation against sell-offs by Arab and foreign investors and corporations. The market capital of listed companies added 15 billion Egyptian pounds, crossing 2.3 trillion pounds at the end of an average transaction of 10 billion pounds. The benchmark index EGX 30 rose 0.3% above the 32,913 point E-mark. The equal weighted indices EGX 70 and EGX 100 climbed 1.4% and 1.2% respectively. France's finance minister, he said he hoped the European Union would reach a deal on tariffs with Washington this weekend. EU and US negotiations are holding talks over the weekend as Brussels chase a deal before a July 9th deadline to avoid the return of steep tariffs. If the European Union does not clink an agreement with the United States by Wednesday next week, higher levies will snap back in the unleashed economic pain on the bloc without a deal. The default levy on EU imports is set to down to 20% or even higher, as US Donald Trump's having threatened at one point to apply 50% duties. And moving to the sports, Real Madrid coach Xabi Alonso has said that he was looking forward to seeing how his new team measure up with the European champion Paris Saint-Germain after the side set up a semi-final showdown at the Club World Cup. Real Kryzhovka appeared to be struggling with injury as she whipped in the closing stages of the third round clashes on court 1. Navarro took advantage to cause the latest upset in the women's tournament following the exit of 5 of the top 6 seeds. Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we came to the end of this political, economy, and sports edition. Till then, I'll see you. It's goodbye. That was me, Shuru Bakir.